Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this Civ overview, we're going to be taking an updated look at one of the classic OG Civs, the Celts. The Celts are classified as an infantry and siege civilization, which is always a very fun and natural pairing, though in the early game, Celts are played as an archer civ quite often as well. According to online win rate stats, Celts are borderline top 10 these days on Arabia, with a notably strong early to mid-game push, falling off as time goes on. Interestingly, it's almost the opposite story in team games though, where they get out to a weaker start, and instead it's their late game strength that carries them and their allies, with a great reputation particularly on close maps like Michi or Black Forest. It's an almost paradoxical dichotomy, with a reputation for hyper-aggressive all-in-play, as well as thriving in drawn-out boomfests, but will make a lot of sense as we dive into their bonuses and techs. Let's check them out. To start with their team bonus, Celts and their allies all have 20% faster working siege workshops, though just keep in mind that doesn't include trebuchets, as they're made at a castle. Right away, this is an example of a major Celt motif in their bonuses, letting them do something a little faster than usual. Whether it's getting your first mangonel out 8 seconds sooner, or massing up siege rams, scorpions, etc. in the late game, as Celts you'll have lots of opportunities to make use of this team bonus, and any allies probably will as well. Related to this, their first bonus is that their siege units then fire 25% faster. In mangonel fights, you'll always reload a bit sooner than your opponent, helping win those momentum-swinging mid-game fights, and of course this also helps out in the late game with any siege weapon except the siege tower, this time including trebuchets. Whether it's just the raw DPS of Celt trebuchets, rams, and scorpions, or sneaking in that one extra shot by a siege onager, these first two bonuses alone put Celts into the top 5 siege civ discussion, and that's before we even get to their incredible unique tech. Their next bonus is their main economy one, which is another faster percentage boost, this time for their Lumberjacks, who work 15% faster. Even if that doesn't account for walking time, making it a little less than 15% more wood in practice, I consider this one of the best eco bonuses in the game, as it's a huge early game boost, and I think the secret to their 1v1 success. 7 Celt Lumberjacks do the work of 8 generic ones, letting you either move one extra villager off wood in Dark Age, or just put your regular number on wood and end up with easily 100 extra wood by the time you hit feudal with most builds. In a fast castle, that's closer to 150 wood by the time you hit feudal alone, making everything incredibly smooth from that point on. While intuitively this helps most with an archer strategy, given they cost wood directly and require an early range or two on top of a blacksmith, extra wood is actually useful for any strategy, letting you get an early market or even transition onto farms more easily. That even makes the Celt Scout Rush feel above average, despite missing bloodlines, and I think best highlights how incredibly flexible this bonus is. When I tried for fun to design the most overpowered archer civ possible from existing bonuses a few years back, this was the eco bonus I picked, and I stand behind that choice. It's not just how much wood it adds up to, which will be hundreds or even possibly 1,000 wood, but how early it helps that makes it so powerful. The one thing to note is that Celts are missing 2-man saw, reducing your advantage from plus 15% to potentially just 5% ahead of other Lumberjacks. Their next bonus is another 15% boost, this time to the movement speed of infantry starting in Feudal Age. This is really the only infantry bonus they get, but it's a good one. Keep in mind the Feudal Age restriction means their militia won't get that boost until you hit Feudal, meaning their trip across the map in Dark Age takes the usual amount of time. For a speed comparison in Feudal, while Celt infantry lag Scout Cavalry of course, their spearmen are faster than Eagle Scouts, and Celt men-at-arms are faster than most things they'll encounter, including spearmen or archers, which men-at-arms usually can't keep up with. You might naturally assume that makes them good against archers, and removes that counter, but with a bit of micro, archers still work incredibly well. Instead, the real advantage is they can simply outrun archers. A man-at-arms rush can chase down villagers and attack buildings, and when enemy archers show up, you can just run them around the map. given a lot of the point of a militia or men-at-arms opening is to keep your opponent preoccupied in their base while you fast castle, wall up, or otherwise get yourself into a good position. Celts end up having one of the stronger men-at-arms rushes in the game, and certainly one of the most annoying, up there with maybe the Romans. In addition, this bonus is also useful for spearmen to fight off any scouts, as while they don't fully keep up, 15% is a noticeable speed boost. The one drawback, similar to their lumber camp bonus, is they're missing squires, meaning once other civs pick that up, you're only about 5% faster than other infantry, so it's much less impressive as the game goes on. Combined with their wood bonus though, it's not surprising Celts get out to such a strong start in those quick games, having a strong economy, extra fast men-at-arms or longswords, on top of faster firing and faster created siege, to really ratchet the pressure up even more in Castle Age. Their final bonus is that Celts can steal sheep from other players, even if those sheep or other herdables are within a unit's line of sight. Admittedly, this is one of the weirder bonuses in the game, and doesn't come into play that often, but you could theoretically use it to try to lame sheep from under an opponent's or even an ally's town center, and can lead to an opponent accidentally shooting their own sheep in an attempt to hit your scout if it's passing by. Personally, I'd be fine if they just removed this bonus from the game at some point, but you should at least be aware it exists. So that's the Celts bonuses, setting the tone as a siege and infantry civ, though with that very strong lumberjack bonus I wouldn't underestimate, as it can make archers or even cavalry feel quite strong in feudal or castle age. Next though, we'll take a look at their castle, which further emphasizes that infantry and siege focus. We'll start with their unique unit, the Woad Raider. I recently looked at this unit in some depth as its own video, but for brief overview purposes, the main selling feature is that this is one of the fastest infantry units in the game, faster than even a knight without husbandry, and only just behind the elite eagle warrior with squires. That doesn't really come at the expense of its stats either, and after some buffs in Definitive Edition, it's quite comparable to the swordsman line, though they do cost a little more on a per unit basis, especially after supplies lowers the swordsman's food cost by 15. Situations that Woad Raiders thrive in are, of course, raiding, needing just 4 hits to kill a villager even without attack upgrades in Castle Age, while also then being much faster than villagers. They're also a little bit anti-building and anti-eagle, thanks to some bonus damage, though not quite as anti-eagle as, say, the swordsman line. They're also an excellent anti-trash generalist, cost-effectively beating the pikemen, skirmisher, and scout lines in Castle and Imperial Age, and the fact they're faster than archers also gives a bit of an anti-archer quality as well, making it harder for archers to hit and run. Even with micro, unprotected crossbows can take some pretty big losses against Woad Raiders. They're then also created quite quickly, which combined again with their speed makes Woad Raiders a great defensive emergency unit to fight off, say, hussars raiding your base. Now, a downside of the Woad Raider is simply that it's not as cost-effective as the swordsman line with supplies, and can't beat knights cost-effectively as one example, without monks, crossbows, or pikes backing them up, so they have their limitations. They also have relatively low pierce armor, so while they have Raider in their name, other units like Huscarls feel at times one step above, given their resistance to town center and castle fire. Generally, I actually find Woad Raiders work best when combined with another unit to cover some sort of weakness. Mixed with pikes, they make a great counter to the classic knight and skirmisher combo as a good example, and they also make a very nice pairing with Celt siege to protect against light cavalry, or Celt knights to give a bit more resistance against enemy spears. The fact they're created so quickly and are so versatile makes them perfect to sprinkle in among whatever army composition you're already committed to. Staying now at the castle, but moving on to the Celts' unique techs, the first takes us in a slightly different, more defensive direction with Stronghold. This gives Celt castles and towers a 33% faster firing rate, as well as a healing aura for nearby infantry. The faster firing is solid, and 33% is nothing to scoff at, though there's 2 things to keep in mind. First, a lot of units that threaten castles or towers either outrange them or have so much pierce armor that faster firing doesn't necessarily change the dynamic, so their castles only end up doing about 15 or 20% more damage than generic ones against standard units. Still, I'm inclined to grab this tech after a castle drop, if for no other reason than to apply a bit more pressure against buildings, and it's a pretty cheap tech, at just 250 food and 200 gold. Its secondary effect of healing infantry is also quite nice, healing 30 HP per minute within a pretty generous range. It means any halberdiers or Woad Raiders you have protecting your trebuchets, for example, get a bit of passive healing. Their second unique tech is Furor Celtica, giving their Siege Workshop units 40% more HP. In contrast to Stronghold, this is a pretty expensive tech, and in 1v1s can be difficult to justify, but really pushes your rams, onagers, and scorpions over the top in some situations. Remember, they all attack 25% faster and are created faster to begin with, now becoming the tankiest as well. Keeping those expensive siege units alive has obvious value, but in some matchups can even cross some critical thresholds. As a couple of examples, Celt siege onagers can take a direct onager shot, whereas generic ones can't, and Celt heavy scorpions also can do the same against both onagers and bombard cannons. In those situations, you're effectively doubling their tankiness and increasing the odds you can sneak out one more attack, which for siege onagers can be a big deal. The problem is just the cost on top of the existing siege upgrades being very expensive to begin with, especially without trade. It's probably not a 1v1 Arabia tech most of the time, but is a key reason why Celt Siege is so feared on Black Forest. So that's their unique unit in techs, giving a versatile infantry unit, more powerful castles, and a way to push their siege from A to S tier if you're floating a lot of resources. Now though, let's see how this all plays in the wider context of their tech tree, starting with the archers. As I mentioned earlier, the Lumberjack bonus alone puts them out to a great start, and Celts are commonly played as a crossbow civ in 1v1s or on the flank in team games. Unfortunately, after early Castle Age, there's a pretty sharp drop-off, missing just about everything in the tech tree, including Arbalester and Bracer. Even with the recently added Ring Archer armor and the great early game, I'd say it's just a C+ from a tech tree perspective. Next up, for infantry, the notable thing missing, of course, is squires, given you have plus 15% speed as a civ bonus. Celts have a great men-at-arms opening, and are one of a handful of civilizations that I'd argue have a viable longsword and siege push in Castle Age. Throw in the versatility of the Woad Raider, and I think it's an A-, with infantry as a solid choice at any stage of the game. Moving on to cavalry, you're missing both bloodlines and the final armor upgrade. That said, you still see Celt Knights, and even sometimes Scouts, with their wood bonus powering a very strong feudal in Castle Age. While you technically have Paladin and Hussar, with your missing techs, they're both in the bottom tier of each. I'd still give Celts though a B at the stable, with the takeaway that even without bloodlines, don't be afraid to incorporate Knights if a situation calls for them. Next up for Siege, you are missing Bombard Cannon, but in this case, I think we can overlook that. You have faster attack for all of these units, faster workshop creation and research speed, with the Civ then going Super Saiyan with a unique tech for 40% more HP. I think it's an A+, with bonus points for not just being great in post-Imperial, but even having a huge advantage in Castle Age Mangonel fights. Moving on to the Navy, a top-tier wood bonus is about the best thing you could ask for. Even without a direct naval bonus, Celts are a decent pick, and I'd say an A- early, with every option available. You might even argue that should be higher, as Celts can keep up with almost any naval civ early on. Late game, you notably miss Bracer and Fast Fireship, so they don't really have a great water option between galleons and fireships, and it's also when your wood bonus starts to lose its edge, if other civs pick up two-man saw. It's enough that it falls off to a B- for me, giving Celts a B+ overall on water. Next up for the monks, while they have about half the techs, the ones they're missing are pretty important, especially block printing and redemption. From a tech tree perspective, they have some of the worst monks in the game, so I'm going with a C-. That said, monks and siege as a combo is something that can work with Celts, carried mostly by the siege and lumberjack bonuses. It's a situation where the monks themselves are quite poor, but a strategy that happens to employ them in part can actually work out. Moving on now to defenses, of course they're missing Bracer, but other than that, the university isn't terrible, and don't forget their unique tech beefing up their castles. Personally, I associate Celts with aggression more than defensiveness, but the tech tree is a reasonable B-. And finally, for their trash units, the Halberdier is great and has some extra speed, though the Skirmisher and Hussar are missing some very important upgrades. As a complete package, I'd say it's just a C+, though if you have even a tiny bit of gold income as Celts, any Woad Raiders or Siege you can incorporate into a trash fight would each go a long way. So to put it all together, it's clear that Celts are well set up for infantry and siege, with bonuses and techs fully supporting that. Opening with 3 militia is very common, and their men-at-arms can certainly be a little extra annoying for archers. That leads smoothly into your own archer or skirmisher follow-up, though with your wood bonus being flexible enough, you can kind of do anything, including scouts. Likewise, in Castle Age, Celts are in a good position playing either crossbows or even knights, with a slight quantity over quality situation applying here. You then have nice passive ways your bonuses can help out, like faster pikemen to mix in against knights and faster firing siege. That's probably most associated with Celts these days in 1v1, with their signature all-in siege push supported by knights, crossbows, monks, or infantry, making use of several of your bonuses at once. It feels like in nearly every game, it's not a matter of if a Celt player is going to make a forward siege workshop, but when. Late game, your options become a bit more restricted, and you really are pushed towards infantry and siege, with halberdier and onager as a classic pairing, though in truth you have 3 good infantry options to choose from depending on what you're up against. The Woad Raider is the most expensive option of the 3, but if you're up against a lot of trash units and can afford it, it's a great unit to mix into almost any situation. Celts are just a classic and always popular civ, featured among the first roster of Age of Kings back in 1999. Speaking of the 90s though, do you guys remember lava lamps? Those were pretty cool. So much so that I decided to open my own store, Spirit of the Lava, a shop dedicated to selling every make and model of lava lamp you can imagine. My new store even has a great website thanks to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is a website builder giving anyone the tools to easily create a website within minutes, using pre-made templates from which you can then customize every detail to suit your idea. Whether you're a blogger, small business owner hoping to show up in online search results, or looking to create an online store for some passive income selling physical, digital, or service goods, Squarespace helps you get started with a professional-looking website. They then have great third-party extensions to handle things like inventory, taxes, shipping, and scheduling to accommodate your specific needs. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial where you can pick a template and domain name to get started. When you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/spiritofthelaw to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So that's an updated look at the Celts, and hopefully gives you a few new ideas to try out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.